Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely wild story of extreme risk, survival, and just unparalleled ambition. We're looking at a journey that literally redefines what it means to build the future from scratch. $400 billion. Let that sink in for a second. How exactly does a severely bullied kid grow up to amass a net worth nearly double that of the second richest person on Earth? We're talking about a guy who creates rockets, electric cars, and AI tools. To really understand this immense wealth and influence, we've got to rewind and go back to the very beginning. Section 1. The Bullied Prodigy. So, to understand the world's richest man, we actually have to start in Pretoria, South Africa. Picture this. His cousin is scared of the dark, and young Elon's intensely logical response is, darkness is only the absence of light. It perfectly captures his unique brain. His parents and doctors actually thought he had a hearing problem at first because he'd just go into these deep, trance-like states, completely oblivious to what was going on around him. But in reality, his brain was functioning like a supercomputer, visualizing complex ideas. The catch, though, was that this hyperlogical, factual way of speaking really isolated him from the other kids. And he ended up channeling that isolation straight into technology. After his parents divorced, a 10-year-old Elon spotted a computer at a mall and somehow convinced his dad to buy it. Now get this, it had just 5 kilobytes of memory, 5 KB. It came with a basic programming workbook that was supposed to take 6 months to finish. Elon, he blew through it in just 3 sleepless days. By the time he was 12, he had coded a whole space shooter game called Blaster and sold it for $500. Boom, his very first real business. But while he was thriving with computers, life at school was absolutely brutal. After facing some really severe bullying, he was actually hospitalized after a gang of students threw him down a flight of stairs. He knew he just had to get out of there. So, at barely 17 years old, Elon used his mother's citizenship connections to move to Canada, eventually making his way down to the US. He honestly believed America was the only place on Earth that could actually match his massive ambitions. Moving on to Section 2, the dot-com millionaire. All right, it's 1995. Elon and his brother Kimball look around and realized people are still using physical, paper phone books to find local businesses. Wild, right? So they decided to build an online city directory called Zip2. Elon was literally coding day and night, while Kimball hit the pavement, going door to door for sales. Well, that relentless grind paid off with a massive buyout in 1999. Compaq acquired Zip2, instantly making Elon a multimillionaire at just 27. He walked away with $22 million. But, as you might guess, he totally refused to just retire and sit on a beach. Instead, he immediately took aim at the slow, old-school banking industry, pouring $12 million of his own money into launching X.com. The problem was, people just didn't trust online banking yet. So his solution? Pure marketing genius. He literally gave users $20 of free, immediately spendable cash just to join and tossed in another $10 for referrals. It was like throwing gasoline on a fire. They gained 200,000 users in just 2 months. But he definitely wasn't alone in this space. Another young entrepreneur, Peter Thiel, had just launched a rival digital bank called PayPal. Both of these companies were burning through millions in marketing, basically trying to destroy each other. To avoid mutual destruction, these fierce rivals actually merged in March 2000. Elon became the CEO and the largest shareholder. But his ruthless micromanagement, expecting days of work to be done in literally hours, and some serious disagreements over the company's name eventually led to a coup. Get this, while he was away on his honeymoon in Australia, the board ousted him as CEO and replaced him with Thiel. Despite losing control of the day-to-day, he remained the largest shareholder. So when eBay bought PayPal in 2002, Elon walked away with a staggering $180 million. But this massive financial triumph was immediately overshadowed by an unimaginable personal tragedy. He tragically lost his 2.5-month-old son to illness. Coping with that profound loss drove him entirely, almost obsessively, back into his work. It was very reminiscent of how he used programming to escape his childhood bullies. Which brings us to Section 3, privatizing the space race. Seeking a brand new industry to completely disrupt, his eyes turned up to the stars. He wanted to prove to the world that life on Mars was actually possible. So he flies to Russia, fully intending to buy intercontinental ballistic missiles for $20 million. But the Russians, they didn't take him seriously at all and demanded $21 million for just one missile. So his team is sitting on the flight home feeling totally defeated, but Elon is just hunched over his laptop, calculating. He suddenly realizes that the raw materials for a rocket were only 2 to 3% of the total cost. The real issue was the aerospace industry's reliance on slow, hyper-expensive third-party suppliers. His light bulb moment? Vertical integration. Just build all the parts in-house. He went right out, bought a 75,000 square foot warehouse, hired some top-tier engineers from Boeing and NASA, and launched SpaceX. Now, to put this into perspective, the industry standard to send a 600-kilogram payload into low Earth orbit was sitting right around $70 million. SpaceX stepped up and boldly promised to do it for a fraction of that cost, just $7 million. But it wasn't exactly smooth sailing. Let's look at Section 4, the 2008 survival crisis. Those massive ambitions almost completely destroyed him when a perfect storm hit in 2008. Over at SpaceX, 3 consecutive Falcon 1 rocket launches had crashed and burned. $100 million just gone in smoke. They only had enough funds left for exactly one more launch. Meanwhile, over at Tesla, he'd invested heavily to create their high-performance electric car, the Roadster. But production costs had completely ballooned to $100,000 for a car they only planned to sell for $65,000. And then the 2008 global financial crisis hit, drying up investor funding entirely. Any logical entrepreneur would have let one company die just to save the other, but not Elon. He actually sold his personal McLaren and risked every last cent he had on a final do-or-die rocket launch, all while Tesla was bleeding cash. And then an absolute miracle. In December 2008, that 4th Falcon 1 launch was a complete success. It reached orbit, officially making SpaceX the very first private company to ever pull that off. That single success instantly secured them a massive $1.6 billion NASA contract. And just weeks later, literally on Christmas Eve, Elon miraculously secured $40 million in emergency funding right at the buzzer to save Tesla from bankruptcy. Somehow both companies survived the crucible. Section 5. Computers on Wheels. Having barely survived that chaos, Elon set out to prove that electric cars were the definitive mass market future. Now, the Roadster proved an EV could be fast, sure, but it was just a niche sports car. The 2012 Model S, that was the real game changer. By swapping out those heavy lead-acid batteries for the kind of lithium-ion tech you'd find in your laptop or phone, it achieved a 500-kilometer range and could hit 97 kilometers per hour in just 4.2 seconds. But the real shift was the tech inside. We're talking a massive 17-inch touchscreen, auto pop-out door handles, and over-the-air software updates. The Model S wasn't just a vehicle anymore. It was a revolutionary computer on wheels that basically forced the entire auto industry to completely pivot. And finally, Section 6, the controversial Titan. Since those early days, his empire has exploded into this modern era of extreme scale, but also extreme scrutiny. As this explainer outlines, you have these 2 distinct sides. On one side, you've got undeniable engineering triumphs, reusable Falcon 9 rockets, Starlink internet satellites, Neuralink, and XAI, all of which propelled him to become the world's richest person. But on the other side, there are intense controversies. We're talking about complaints regarding extreme workplace pressure, massive immediate layoffs right after his Twitter acquisition, and frequent tweets that cause severe market volatility. Plus, he has stepped deeply into some highly polarizing political spheres, including donating roughly $280 million to Donald Trump's election campaign. It really is a potent, heavily scrutinized combination of immense wealth and political power. When you look at all of this, it really boils down to this one reality. You love him or hate him, but you cannot ignore him. Because a man doesn't wait for the future, he builds the future himself. Ultimately, whether you view him as an inspiring visionary advancing human progress or as a highly controversial figure wielding unchecked influence, his impact on our global technological trajectory is just completely inescapable. So it leaves us with one massive question. Which industry will his extreme problem-solving disrupt next? As we look back at the astonishing empire he's constructed, starting all the way from a severely bullied kid with a 5-kilobyte computer to a titan sitting on a $400 billion fortune, it leaves us all wondering what the very next chapter holds for him and for the future he's actively trying to build. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.